Late General Muritala Muhammed. Born Muritala Muhammed on November the 8th, 1938. Married to Ajoke Rahmat Mohammed and became the military ruler also known as the head of the Federal Military Government of Nigeria on July the 29th, 1975. He was assassinated along with his ABC, Lieutenant Akintode Akinshenwa, on February the 13th, 1976, when his car was ambushed en route to his office at the Dan Barracks, Lagos. During his rule, he introduced the popular phrase, fellow Nigerians, and with immediate effect, which became part of the nation's vocabulary. He also fought corruption, bringing some corrupt officials to trial. In recognition of his numerous contributions to the country's economic growth, he became the first Nigerian citizen to have his portrait appear on a Nigerian currency note, the 20 naira note. His plan to orderly transit to civilian rule was completed by his successor, the Chief of Staff Supreme Headquarters, Olusegun Obasanjo, who handed over power to Shehu Shagari on October 1st, 1979. Today, Muritala Muhammed International Airport, Lagos, is named in his honor. Nigeria is a blessed nation.
Politics must be transformed from its previous scenario of bitter personal wrangles into a healthy game of political argument and discussion. You should explore how to create a new parliamentary system which will not arouse ecstatic tribal frenzies which were characteristic of the previous political atmosphere. It is important that we avoid a reopening of those deep splits which caused trauma in the country. The Supreme Military Council has carefully discussed these and other related matters and agreed on the following. We are committed to a federal system of government and a free, democratic, and lawful system of government which guarantees fundamental human rights. Fellow Nigerians, events of the past few years have indicated that despite our great human and material resources, the government has not been able to fulfill the legitimate expectations of our people. Nigeria has been left to drift. This situation, if not arrested, would inevitably have resulted in chaos and even bloodshed. In the endeavor to build a strong, united, and virile nation, Nigerians have shed much blood. The thought of further bloodshed, for whatever reasons, must, I'm sure, be revolting to our people.
General Muritala Muhammed, in his elements there, from when he took over power and when he was assassinated on February 13, 1976, where he was a man who was thought to have a clear-cut idea of what his administration wanted to achieve, and in returning Nigeria at that time to civil democratic rule, and in setting up the FRA Williams Committee that eventually resulted in a constituent assembly and the making of the 1979 Constitution. My guest is Sebastian Agbinda. He is a development expert. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's begin by reflecting on the 198 days of General Muritala Muhammed. What are your recollections?
I had just finished my HSC, Government College Kefi, and I was teaching in the secondary school. And, you know, the fact Muritala represented Nigeria, every person just felt that they were Nigerian on account of his decisiveness. The issues he was, you know, tackling and the manner, the decisiveness of his handling the issues told you that he was an embodiment of inclusion. Each time he spoke, you were not aware which ethnic group, where you came from. He was typically Nigerian. Unfortunately, the sound bites you have brought here have not brought out his own foreign policy, which again made you feel proud. You know, today they look at it as the golden age of Nigeria's foreign policy. And, you know, when he took on the West over Angola. And the transition in Angola, the U.S. was meddling, like the Russians meddled in the U.S. elections. The U.S. The presidency at the time was meddling in Nigerian transition from colonial to the new democracy in a new country. The decolonization process was being modeled up by the West and the U.S., and he confronted it in a way that brought out every Nigerian was happy with him. Every African was happy with Muritala.
So he was very decisive as far as...
He was not just a Nigerian, he was a Pan-Africanist on account of that Africa has come of age foreign policy output from Nigeria.
Which he made at the then OAU in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia.
Thank you very much.
He was very
decisive
was very clear
again.
And decisive as far as foreign policy
and so you
concerned.
could see that the decisiveness, you cannot export what you don't have. The decisiveness in Nigeria, he exported it into the rest of Africa in the context of that, Angola. Africa has come of, he wasn't speaking about Nigeria, but it was Nigeria, and he was saying Africa needs to be led by Nigeria. What better place to exercise that mandate than over the Angolan decolonization process? He was talking about Angola in the context of Mozambique. He was talking about Angola in the context of South Africa, of Zimbabwe. These were the outstanding of Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, and all that. And it was an export from the decisiveness at home. The link was there. It's unlike now. When Buhari speaks, you do not see decisiveness. You do not see inclusion. When he speaks, you see Fulani supremacy, Fulani exceptionalism. You're not seeing, you never knew where Muritala came from.
Yeah, but this was a man who was thrown up by a military coup.
Yes.
Ordinarily, not one that Nigerians should embrace. What was it that made him appeal to the Nigerian populace?
His patriotism. You saw him as a Nigerian. You see, you can read, a government can be talking about patriotism, inclusion and all that, and they are doing the other thing. And you are not an idiot, you know. Nigerians and any other person in the population, they know they have instruments that measure leadership. When you come out and you are saying, I am truly Nigerian, we are patriotic, we are doing this and this, the other people, the Nigerian people, as it were, are able to put you through a meter. And they say, look, where he's going, what he's saying contradicts what he's doing. He's just verbalizing about Nigeria. He's not a Nigerian. We know him. We know him from his antecedents. That's what they tell you. So it's not how much you shout about negritude that makes you an African. But the output, what you do, that is what Muritala was doing. Muritala moved Lagos, call it capital, to Abuja. And over time, even those who had some residue of doubt have come to acknowledge that it was the wisest decision to take. It has not. It has still continued. Lagos is still the industrial capital of Nigeria. It's one of, if you look at it in country-wise terms, it is still one of the biggest economies within Africa. Lagos is still moving on account of good leadership from Tinubu and all that. And so it has not diminished the value or, the trajectory of Lagos's development has continued to be positive in spite of having lost the toga of the administrative capital city of, and everybody has come to understand that, look, this was very solid, decisive action. You have to understand, too, that in bifurcative terms, your present leader, that's Buhari, was seen as a cut from the mold of Muritala, but it has turned out that he's not. In any way, he cannot be seen as an embodiment of corruption. He has wavered. He has prevaricated. He's not been decisive. When he went to the
let's look at some of those decisive actions that Muritala Muhammed initiated and pursued domestically. I mean, what are those things that you can pinpoint and you think that are still relevant today in nation building?
Even decisiveness, you seem to underestimate the importance of decisiveness, patriotic decisiveness. By the time you embody that spirit of decisiveness, taking decisions, taking them early, not prevaricating, not wavering, not pushing it forward, it is not an area where any of our present leadership, can be characterized. So that alone, now that defined every other thing that he did. The decisiveness, the patriot. He took measures on account of being and wants to be understood and was understood as Nigerian. Very, very important. Every other thing, you can enumerate all of them. It comes back to the fact that he was decisive, he was patriotic. You can talk about the movement to Abuja, the anti-corruption battle. For instance, we are complaining today that Buhari, is talking about Fulani supremacy in the security architecture of Nigeria. I imagine that if Muritala were here, he would shudder. He would imagine that no Nigerian leader would do what Obasanjo calls clannishness. Of the most, is beyond xenophobia, it's clannishness. Not even Trump is doing that type of thing in the U.S. Now, Muritala's decisiveness and patriotism was such that he could not, in his widest imagination, imagine that such a thing would happen during his term, or that a former military ruler would allow that type of thing, the clannishness, to take over. Not just the federal civil service, but the military, the extremely strategic military component.
Talking about the civil service, you recall that one of the decisiveness or decisive decisions he took at that time was the dismissal of well over 10,000 public officers from the service.
That had its problems over time. At the time, it was hailed as extremely successful, but it traumatized the civil service. It created, far from resolving the sit-tight mentality or that was there in the civil and the so-called seeming corruption. Over time, there negatives came from it. Of course, you cannot score 100% in situations like that. But when you compare his positives and negatives, then even though the civil service foray, output in the area of civil service, over time we have come to understand that it did harbor some, but you must understand that that wasn't his intention. It was only over time that we came to acknowledge that there was some, but at the time everybody hailed the policy. And
of purging the civil
Purging
service,
the
the public
civil
service
service,
of
the
well
public
over
ser-
10,000 people, which
it
ultimately
did
affected almost
confidence,
every
every facet.
aspect of national life, the judiciary, the armed forces, even the universities were all affected.
You couldn't, for instance, say that, look, he was doing it to strengthen some ethnic base, or doing it so that he will now bring his own ethnic base into broaden the, ethnic broadening of
But
the
let's
base.
look at how that purge has affected the public service over the years. In the last 40 years or thereabout, how did that impact on the civil service and what it has turned out to be today?
We should not over magnify what it did. As a look, the civil service has gotten worse, not on account of Muritala's output, or in the context of what it did at the time. So many so many other forces, parasitic forces, came in to feed on the problems that were some
that were created by that purge, because he sent people away
instance,
without as much as paying them their benefits, without benefits and the law.
I prefer to celebrate Muritala under the circumstance when I want to compare him with Muritala than to spend time here looking at how the impact of his policy in the civil service on them. I know, for instance, that what Buhari is doing now in the context of Fulani supremacy is destroying the civil service, and he knows what he's doing. Muritala never set out to create the problems that were generated.
We may never
time.
know
I don't
what
think,
his thinking was.
We should know.
That,
Nobody in the literature that you're reading, I will tell you that, look, Muritala knew what he was doing, that he was trying to create confusion in the civil service and create some of the ripple negatives that emerged from it. You have to look at that in the context of his other policies in the other sectors. And then you begin to understand that the intention, very important to read the intention, the interest. What is the intention? What is the interest? What is the objective? Now, you know, for instance, what, say, Buhari is doing. You know the intentions. Crass clannishness.
You are the ones reading those intentions into his actions. You are reading those intentions.
You have to read them.
Those may not be
you have to read
intentions.
Them. What about the intention? So you think, much as you may disagree with Obasanjo, you think that the branding of him as clannish, can you brand Muritala as clannish? Use that letter that Muritala wrote and the follow-up letter by IPB. Would you use that to characterize Muritala's government in any way? But then you know it suits firmly. Nobody has come to. You may disagree with IBB. You may disagree with Obasanjo over whatever.
Yes,
but you cannot challenge him on the content.
Let's leave.
You have to compare Muritala with the present leadership and so many other leaderships, or you will not do justice to him. I don't understand what you want us to leave.
No, anyway. I want us to leave this issue of comparisons now and focus on the policies and implementation of those policies that came about during the Muritala Muhammed era, and deal with them. One of which was the cancellation of the 1973 census figures and a reversion to the 1963 census figures.
No, in present terms, again, you don't want us to compare. There were obvious problems with the census figures in terms of integrity.
What were those problems?
Inflation, the whole process was faulty from beginning to end, and it was clear. Nobody challenged him when he cancelled the figures. And you see, because it was easy to read Muritala. For instance, did you imagine that he cancelled the figures for today in Nigeria? For instance, the census figures do not have religion. They do not have tribe. Very few Nigerians understand that or the intention. Do you understand why there is no tribe component to your census, or there is no religion component to it?
Was there one? Were those
in
components
the
there in 1973?
the one that it took you back to, had
that's the one. That's the 1963 figures.
That he took you back to.
But
it had
did
those.
the 1973 figures have those components?
I cannot give you an exact answer to that. But the 63 had...
Because the perception then was that, Muritala cancelled or scrapped the 1973 figures because the population figures that came from the south seemed to outweigh and overshadow those from the north.
It is possible. And for us in the Middle Belt, we had no problem with the cancellation. We are not core north. We had no problem with the cancellation. Our figures were good. We would like, for instance, for the figures to reflect the character of ethnicity and the character of religion, where there's no fear over. It's very, very important because, for instance, what you're having now, you have headsmen. They are not from that heavy in the Middle Belt. They come in and go. Maybe over time they will say they are part of the Middle Belt, they are part of Benue. So the fact that you are not including the ethnic character is a major strategic advantage for certain groups. And for instance, you talk of Hausa Fulani, they are not one tribe. You're talking of North. You just mentioned it. You're looking at North being Muritala cancelled because the North...
The perception
then, the North was not in an advantageous position. I'm not aware that the Middle Belt was in a disadvantageous position. There may be some other part of the North. It's important to create these distinctions because, for instance, I'm telling you that my own area wants ethnic character, the ethnic structure to reflect, to resonance you don't even have it. Very few Nigerians understand. We understand why. Don't seem to understand that religion and ethnicity is not reflected in their census since that first one. The North is not a monolith under the circumstances like you are even seeing now. So when you begin to say, look, Muritala may have cancelled to exercise northern hegemony, northern supremacy, you're entirely wrong on it. And those who exercise that northern hegemony, northern exceptionalism, northern supremacy, are not from, for instance, the Middle Belt.
Okay, let's look at one other action that the Muritala administration took, which was the access investigation of public officers at that time. Looking back now, would you say that was probably the beginning of the anti-corruption crusade?
No, but he was seen as anti-corruptionist. Today, it's easy. You do a census of Abuja, for instance. You do a census of any of the cities. You want to know who owns. It's easy to do it. Even if you put your own child's name who hasn't been born, it will catch up with you. Why is the so-called African anti-corruption champion not doing? I'm talking about Buhari. They started that and stopped. Nobody, and we're talking about decisive leadership, nobody has followed up. Where are Muritala's assets since he died? His children may be in business. They may have been...
When you say that, if Muritala instituted this system and this structure, why was it not sustained by the successive governments after him?
Well, that is because they didn't believe. They set out to be corrupt. They didn't believe in what he was doing. I have said it here that Buhari, for instance, seemed to come from the same mold. If you go through the literature before 2015, his ascendance to power, Buhari was seen as the other part of Muritala. That was his characterization. Of course he's not. We have come to see that he's not. He doesn't share anything in foreign policy, in domestic policy.
After Muritala, you had the Shehu Shagari administration, and then, of course, the return to military rule.
They didn't follow up. They didn't.
Exactly. Why was there?
They were not committed.
Follow up.
They were not committed to the vision. Muritala's vision, it was
Why
his.
are we always failing to build institutions and keep hoping that individuals
in a democracy, yes,
will continue to
Nigerians
drive the process?
Nigerians don't even understand the importance of institutions. Most Nigerians don't. Only the very educated people. And they are not, the legislation building which creates institutions. Institutions are not created so much by policy as they are created by the legislative process. It's a very difficult mental process. And Nigeria has grown over a period where, you know, it was the military and the legislative process was in abeyance. And the new crop of, politicians are obsessed with making money. They are not obsessed with developing institutions via legislation. Look at your president, for instance.
Isn't that what we should be focusing on now? Isn't that what we should be focusing on rather than focusing on the individual? Because we seem to be obsessed with the personality of the president.
Military rule,
when the institutions...
Under military rule.
We have had over 18 years of democratic
under military rule, it is easier to create a decree if the leader is visionary. Now, I'll give you the example from the other hand. You had Gaddafi. Forget about having stayed for too long. Within 10 years, through dictatorship, he used the military as a transformation agent and created institutions, several institutions that made him extremely popular. His greatest problem was his refusal to leave. If he had left within 10 years, you would have had. Now, if Muritala too stayed for another 10 years, this country would have been a different entity altogether. In terms of outlook and all that, it would have been a little more difficult to circumvent that vision. It is easier, like I said earlier, for the military, conscious of it and its vision and mission, to create institutions. Under democracy, like we have had mostly military rule, the new crop of politicians are not aware of the importance of developing institutions. Their obsession is pecuniary, is predatory, pecuniary, in that context. So they do not, for instance, NABA. I worked with NABA. You are aware of it. Within the short period that he was there, we created your telecommunications institution was started by him, the electricity, pensions, armed forces ruling, secondary roads bill, 20 bills. I was the one who presided over ensuring that they got flesh. No other assembly has contemplated that in the whole country. Not to talk of, none of them has even, contemplated a legislative agenda during, say, Dogara or Ete and even Masari. Now, where is your executive agenda in the context of legislation? Buhari doesn't even understand that he needs to have a legislative initiative that
was that legislative agenda there with previous presidents?
The earlier president was Abdul Salami.
Yeah, after
it's on his decree.
After him, you had Obasanjo.
Obasanjo didn't come.
And after Obasanjo, you had Yaradua.
He didn't come.
And then you had Jonathan.
He didn't come. Jonathan had, Yaradua, for instance, had a 7-point agenda. My master's thesis was just 7 lines. He didn't even have a document. Your president today came out with an executive order on local content. That ought to have been legislation. And it should have come early. His development blueprint came much later. There is not one legislation that he has contemplated on the back of his that massive policy.
How many of such were contemplated and put forward, say for instance, by the Obasanjo administration, by the Goodluck administration?
No. Obasanjo didn't have a set of bills that he had on coming into power.
A legislative, an executive agenda.
He didn't have. What he did was to after he managed to ease NABA out of the way, he now started stealing into the NABA agenda. The pensions regulatory law was NABA's bill. The gas law, he brought it and withdrew it. Was the electricity law, even the telecommunications law, and we have documents to prove that. By the time you're coming to power, for instance, in the U.S., when Trump came in, he came with a set of he understood that, look, on day one, these are the bills I'm bringing to Congress. Tax reform. He's talking of infrastructure reform, the $1.whatever trillion. From day one, he had them. So he understood the areas that he's going to amend and repeal Obamacare. That's legislation. He had a legislative, let me round up, he had a legislative agenda all cut out. Buhari doesn't understand that. Obasanjo didn't understand that. Naba understood that. The moment he came, he said...
Did Jonathan understand that?
He didn't understand it. Buhari
So-
didn't...
so
I
he-
mean,
so-
but then, this is progressive. Buhari is supposed to have understood it better than the earlier ones, because you learn from the failure of the past. So when we begin to measure, we are going to give him greater culpability than we give Jonathan or give Obasanjo, because he is supposed to have learned from their failings. There is what you call the disadvantage or the advantages of coming late. You learn from the disadvantages of the earlier of your father, and then you improve on it. So for instance, the next president, if I were president, if I'm supporting any candidate to be president, on the day he's coming in, I can give him 20 bids that will resolve a lot of problems in this country, from your ASU strike and all that. 20. So the day he's inaugurating the assembly, he says, here are 20 bids. That is what the next president should do. And then the institutions that you are talking about, the institutional character of the government, the vision we made from this, they are not doing that. You say Buhari is fighting corruption. Where is the amendment to any of the existing laws that he has brought that will accelerate the process of fighting corruption? How is he handling assets management?
Is he a problem? Is he fought with the laws that we have presently, or the lack of sincerity in the implementation?
It is the absence of vision. They are not taking governance seriously. They are taking governance as an opportunity. For instance, you are now saying that Buhari is just a Fulani man. He's not a Nigerian. He never really saw himself as coming to resolve Nigeria's problems. He has a narrow ethnic intention. By the time you understand that, look, this country has greatness, we can manage it, and I will immortalize myself. And then, of course, there are young men, there are people there who have the capacity
that does not speak to the issue that I'm asking now.
Bring it up again.
It has to do with the fact of what you raise. Legislation. Now,
How do you contemplate?
If the laws are there, the EFCC law, for instance, the ICPC Act, for instance, is there anything wrong with them? Must we change them because we need to change them, or that there is a fault or there is a lacuna in those acts that inhibits the fight against corruption? Have we applied these laws well enough to determine that there is a lacuna here and there that we need to plug?
The EFCC is a good institution, just like the ICPC.
Exactly. So if the laws are there...
Now, if these are strong institutions that deployed properly, Obasanjo set it up and started using it to hound enemies.
The fault is not in the laws themselves, but in the implementation of
not just implementation, in conceiving. You need so many... For instance, you talked about EFCC. There is you are aware of Egmont. Yes. Egmont is a new financial intelligence unit made up of 152 countries worldwide. It is supposed to be independent. Some countries have it as independent. For us here, because it's supposed to service, for instance, defense industries, because its mandate includes not just financial, it's financial in the context of terrorism, in the context of religion and all that, not just financial. You're talking about terror that is supported by financial, so you see security inside. And so it is supposed to be an independent entity in the same way that the EFCC is. Its intelligence is supposed to service a broad range of other institutions from DSS and all that. The EFCC is insisting that it must be in its powers. The central bank, in a strange manner, seems to say, look, bring it and hand it over to us. It is not supposed to be there. It's not supposed to be in EFCC. It's supposed to be on its own. And it's supposed to service EFCC as it services the central bank. So again, you can see a new body that is supposed to be independent that will help in ferreting international information on, say, you're talking of VEITS in the UK today. It is your financial intelligence unit, part of that Egmont group, that will get information on the location of Nigerian, the assets
owned by
Nigerians in the US, in the UK, and all that. Now, if such a body gets that information, it can pass it to FIRS, it can pass it to DSS, it can pass it to EFCC and all. Why does EFCC, for instance, want you to be harbored in its bowels? You understand that type of thing? So, your President Buhari has no clue. He has not brought out his position on the fact that this new body should be independent. And it is a critical body for anti-corruption, the anti-corruption war. The presidential, the executive perspective is not there. The National Assembly has two perspectives. One is saying, take it to EFCC. The other one is saying, take it to Central Bank. Your president doesn't even have a position. So you see the outlook, the vision, the mentality of the president is critical in these matters, in how institutions are developed, how they are deployed, how they are misused, how they are used patriotically.
Okay. All right. Well, when we return from this interlude, we will be looking at the third National Development Plan, which was one of those plans that the Muritala Muhammed administration sought to put in place. He actually initiated a comprehensive review of that development plan. And let's interrogate how it has impacted on Nigeria's development process since after that time. And, of course, the Constituent Assembly that was empaneled by that administration to draw up new constitution for Nigeria. But for now, the agitation for state police is gathering momentum. The Nigerian Governors Forum is the latest to give the agitation the much-needed impetus with the call for the decentralization of the police in Nigeria. The chairman of the forum, Governor Abdulaziz Yari, stated this at the end of a two-day security summit in Abuja just yesterday. Let's take a listen.
I have something.
Nigerian Governors Forum and the governor of Zamfara State, Abdulaziz Yari, said the Governors Forum had endorsed the idea of state police since 2015, but that the division within the forum at that time made it difficult for them to marshal further action on it. He said the governors met later in August 2017 and had reached a common ground on it, which the governors have now put on the table at this security summit.
Today, we have reiterated the position of the Vice President and the position of that security summit that we held in August, that there's a need for the state police. And we can say it's only the answer.
Nigeria's Vice President Yemi Osinbajo had canvassed similar idea, which tallies with the resolution of the ruling All Progressive Congress APC on restructuring. Yari dismissed fears that state police would become a weapon of coercion if left in the hands of state governors, arguing that if governors are not doing same with state courts, he doubts if they would with state police. Yari said state police should be gradual and not what all the states should do at the same time.
And for instance, if Lagos State, as mighty Lagos as rich as they are, they can have state police. The federal police that are in Lagos can be reduce the number to Osun, Ogun, and other states that cannot do it.
Nigeria security chiefs and other critical stakeholders have been brainstorming on Nigeria's security challenges, hoping to identify the lapses within the entire security architecture and to come up with ways of fixing them. The summit is taking every submission seriously, particularly on the issue of state police.
To collect the suggestions that have been made, and they are coming from the two various sectors that we saw this morning and this afternoon, from the Governors Forum and from the traditional rulers, the regional groups.
But as Nigeria comes out of the summit, the biggest security threat is perhaps the conflict of land resources between herdsmen and farmers, with suggestions asking Nigeria to look for modern ways of breeding cows in form of cattle colonies.
You need to educate people. You need to build in the infrastructure for establishing ranching in the country. So if you don't do that, you say the cow should not move, and you are establishing a militia. So what do you expect them to do?
The idea of Katikoloni has sparked serious anxiety in the country amid fears mostly coming from the south that there is a hidden agenda by a section of the country to dominate others.
We are not just discussing about the safety of individuals, we are also discussing about the safety of the herdsmen, because they are also under attack themselves.
The summit is organized by the Nigerian Senate.
There you have it, the Governors Forum throwing his weight behind the agitation for state police. You recall that at the beginning of that security summit, Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo had also canvassed the establishment of state police as a panacea to the security challenges Nigeria is having today. And so we seem to be moving in that direction gradually, with so many people saying, look, devolve a lot more powers to the states, to the federating units, and let them at that level handle some responsibilities, including, of course, the state police. And you recall, too, that the True Federalism Committee that was set up by the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, headed by Governor El-Rufai, had also recommended that state police should be thrown into the mix. Now, you also recall that during the Muritala Muhammed era, General Muritala Muhammed set up a 50-man constitution drafting committee, which was headed then by now late legal icon F.R.A. Williams, Rotimi Williams. Now, that constitution drafting committee, of course, the product of their work eventually led, as it were, to the 1979 Constitution. Mr. Gbenda, let's look back a little bit and look at that committee, that so-called 50 wise men, they were called then at that time, and how their work has impacted on our constitutional development over the years.
Well, the 1979 Constitution was a break from the earlier parliamentary
system of government.
Yeah, this was our embrace of the presidential system, with some of it, and of course the character is still.
Even though Muritala Muhammed seemed to have favored a parliamentary system in his speech,
yeah,
but the committee came up with the presidential system of government.
In one breath, you can say that, well, he was referring to parliament, even though he wasn't talking of parliamentary system. He was merely talking of parliament as synonymous with Congress. So you have to be careful. He didn't say parliamentary system of government. He said parliament, and he connoted parliamentary system, of course, given our
predisposition to the parliamentary system before that.
He could very well have meant parliament in the context of being synonymous with Congress. You know, you can use them. You can say the American Parliament, and it is still not British parliamentary system
of government.
So that's that for that. You saw the 50. You could see patriotism. It exuded, inclusiveness. Everybody was there. Everybody was happy. There were very few challenges and the 1979 Constitution has set the stage for all the other constitutions. Today we are talking of maybe understanding how the Congress has abused its pecuniary outlook. So much money, they don't want to disclose their budget, which is incredible, and they seem to make the obsession with. So Nigerians are beginning to say, look, given the cost, do we need to, but it's still in the context of your presidential system. Maybe we don't need to, we need part-time, all on account of the fact that the National Assembly is not as productive. They are not seen as resolving Nigeria's problems because the magnitude of the problems, the problems get compounded. They are getting. It means your legislative process is not sufficiently addressing these problems. That is why the problems are getting out of hand. You're tinkering with the problems. So Nigerians are beginning to feel that maybe there's a problem with this presidential system
of government.
And
the common criticism is that it is too expensive to run.
It is the operators that have made it expensive. Now, for instance, you have not addressed the issue of health infrastructure in Nigeria in the larger context of that infrastructure challenge. In January, the report on infrastructure says Nigeria's infrastructure status is the worst ever across the board, including within the military infrastructure. So it is the operators of this presidential system that have not helped it to deliver. If you made it, if you were more cost conscious around it, if you were not predatory in pursuing utilizing the presidential system for personal benefits, which is the obsession of the political class in operating this presidential system, Nigerians will not. You have not been able to resolve this herdsmen crisis. It's legislative. You can legislate nationally on it. I have written on it. The framework is there. So they can legislate on it. Let nobody tell you they can't. They can do it. They can legislate on every area. They can legislate. They take monies from your excess crude, and they say they are helpless. The president says it's helpless in some areas. It is completely false. They have capacity to legislate on every matter, and legislation is critical. I keep telling you, it is only through legislation that the institutions will emerge. They are able to, all these monies they make for themselves as members of the various legislatures, instead of making, why are they not saying, look, let us make it part-time, let us curtail the number, let us rule out. They can do that if they are patriotic.
Those are suggestions that have been thrown up.
Redefine
the
so it's not
constituencies,
yes,
and reduce the number of people who are represented.
Make it part-time, reduce
the 2014 National Conference actually suggested
so
something along that line.
They do not like it because it conflicts with their outlook, with their vision, with their mindset. So, you have IBB and Obasanjo talking about new leadership. Of course, we have seen young men in power in their 40s, and they have been more predatory. That's the pathetic. That doesn't mean that you don't have very creative
young people.
Young people,
yes,
they are there. But our embrace of some of them leaves you with a sourer taste in your mouth. It has nothing to do with youth versus the gerontocracy. It has to do with vision, outlook, how your perception.
Yeah. All right, thank you so much. We've been with Sebastian Agbenda, a development expert, and we've been taking a look at the Muritala Muhammed years, 198 days of impactful governance, as some people have described it, and how some of the actions that were taken then have continued to impact on national life 42 years thereafter. Thank you so much, Mr. Agbenda, for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, you can continue to watch this particular edition and all other editions of People, Politics, and Power on our YouTube page. Just go there, and of course, you will have everything there. And of course, I'm sure that you have also been following us on our Facebook page. Where when we return on Wednesday, we'll be bringing you a fresh edition on another national issue. I'm Imoni Amarere. Do have yourself a wonderful time for the rest of today. Bye for now.